Hello everyone, and welcome to our Bentley Civil Keynote. My name is Derek Gray with Bentley Civil Product Management. Today we want to take a little bit of time, if we can, to give you a SELECTseries 3 preview. We've been working very hard, very diligently on some new technology and new functionality that we are extremely excited about. And we decided in this keynote to do something a little bit differently. In times past, sometimes I call it death by PowerPoint. We give you a lot of PowerPoint bullets and AVIs, and so this time we decided to go with a little bit different tact, and instead of going the PowerPoint and the AVI method, we just decided to show everything live. There's an old adage that a picture's worth 1,000 words, and the idea of starting from scratch in a blank file and bringing in a terrain model, creating horizontal vertical geometry, and eventually a model. Being able to do all that live really shows the power, the flexibility of our new technology and the new user experience that we're going to be able to deliver for you. And so, welcome to the keynote. Now, I want to, before we begin, I'll have one little caveat. Now, please keep in mind as we move into this that this is not meant as an unveiling of the new software. The software is not ready yet. It's still several months from being production ready, and so that's not the point of this. There's a few things we're still working on. We're still working on some of the features. So as we move through today, you may see a glitch here and there with symbologies or screen updates or things like that. So please just understand that this is a preview. We are working with pre-beta software. But we felt like it was worth it to go ahead and just design a live project so you can get a real feel of what this software is going to be able to provide for you and do for you in the months ahead. So again, welcome to the keynote. Sit back, relax. I hope you enjoy it, and let's move in and begin to design our project with SELECTseries 3. As we begin today, let's take a look first of all at our finished product. Here we've got a view open with our plan view alignment. Here we've got a view open with our profile. And then over here we've got our 3D model. Now what we all want is dynamic updates and smart, fast, intelligent updating. For example, we want to be able to go into our alignment and change something about that alignment. For example, change them or move the length of a transition, and then watch that transition move in our 3D view and have everything update on the fly. For example, you'll notice as I'm actually moving the transition in my plan view, not only is my 3D alignment updating in my 3D view, but also my existing ground is being recut in my profile view. Now, what we all want to be able to do is make those types of changes and see everything dynamically update on the fly. We also want to be able to quickly undo things in case we've made a mistake and put those things back the way they started. We want to be able to do the same thing, for example, with our profile. We want to be able to pick our profile, try different profiles, and see what kind of changes those make when in our cut and fill values and possibly even the cost of our project as well. And so this is where we want to go, and we're going to give you the ability in SS3, as you can see here, to do all of those types of things. But there's one thing we need to point out as we begin. In order to be able to give you these kinds of updates, then you've got to be able to design smarter. We've got to be able to remember not only what you did, but why you did it. We've got to be able to preserve your design intent. So as we move ahead, this is where we want to get to. And what we'll do in our presentation today is we'll just kind of start from scratch with a new project. We'll build all the elements and we'll get to this point right here. But again, as we move throughout this process, keep in mind that if this is where we want to get to, you've got to have software that not only gives you that ability, but gives you the confidence to know that when you make that final change and everything updates, that it's all going to be done correctly. So as we begin our project, let's point out a couple things to begin with. First of all, you'll notice that we're running inroads. Obviously, we'd like to be able to run all three of our products, Geopack, Inroads, and MX, but a demonstration like this is really only conducive to running a single product. So we're just going to run Inroads with our data today, but I want you to keep in mind that everything that we're going to be showing, all the new technology, all the new functionality, is available and works exactly the same in all three of our civil products. So as we begin, I want to come up and just notice we're actually in a blank file. I've got an existing topo map referenced in here, so I'll just turn that off and turn it back on. So this is just a reference topo file that we've got brought in here, but we're actually in a blank file. So what we want to do is just start with a standard type of project with a topo file and begin to develop our project from our terrain model to our horizontal vertical alignments and eventually to our final model. So to begin, let's go over to our task navigation menus. You can see here I've got access to all of my terrain modeling tools, and one of these is create from file. So we're going to bring this up, and you can see I've got access to all different types of file types here. Notice we can also bring in, for example, legacy data from our existing products such as Geopack 10s and Inroads DTM. So I'm going to just kind of show the collaboration between the products. Since we're running Inroads, I'll just start with a Geopack 10 file. So I'm going to select my ground.10, and we'll get some different options here to bring this in. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to select my file units. My Geopack 10 is unitless, so I need to know what units they were saved in, and I happen to know they were saved in survey feet. We also want to set a feature definition to control some symbology and stuff for our terrain model, so I'm going to do that by selecting existing ground. And I've also got some triangulation options, and I'm just going to set my maximum side length to 100. So we'll import this in, and as we do, we can see our triangles come in very nicely behind us here. Now, the first thing to point out in SS3 and part of the new technology is the fact that the DTM moves inside of Microstation. Okay, so what I mean by that is the terrain model moves out of our external files such as the .tin, the .dtm, and the .fil, and actually moves into Microstation, and Microstation actually becomes the container to hold our terrain model. Now to do this, what we've done is in Microstation now we have a new type of element called a terrain model element. So just like Microstation has a line element, a shape element, a curve element, a B-spline element, now Microstation has a new element called a terrain model. Now, since this is just a Microstation element, notice I can query this with the element info. So for example, I can come in here and look at the information for that terrain model. I can see the number of points. I can see if I have any islands or holes or voids, any break lines, and the number of triangles. Now you'll also notice that I also have access to control the display of this. Do I want to see contours, triangles, or flow area? But you'll also notice that at the time, for right now, they're actually grayed out. Now let me explain why. So let's dismiss this and we'll come back to it in just a second. You'll notice in the upper left here that I'm actually in a 2D model. Now, because the terrain model is obviously a 3D element, we need it to be stored as a 3D element in order to hold on to its elevations. But since I'm in a 2D model, and when I imported it, the software was intelligent enough to recognize that, and when it did, it automatically created a 3D model for me in my file. So it just took the name of my current model and put a 3D extension on it. Now, not only did it do that for me, but it also took that 3D model and it referenced it in for me automatically to the 2D. So you can see here, if I go turn this reference off, that my terrain model is actually referenced into my 2D from my newly created 3D model. So everything you're seeing here, the triangles, are in a reference file. Now, I can continue to select them just like I can select any reference element. And now as I go back over to the info dialog, we can see why the calculated features are grayed out, because they're in a reference. Now, that's no problem because I have access to my reference file override. So I'm just going to double click on that, and turn on the reference file override. Now when I do that, all the features now become available to me. So for example, if I want to turn off triangles, I can easily do that and just leave the boundary element on. For example, if I wanted to see the contours, I could come back over here and turn contours on. Or maybe I want to see the flow areas, so I can kind of look at my drainage and see which way water's flowing across my terrain model. So you can literally control the display of your terrain model directly from the element info dialog. Now what this means is for example, my terrain model is now inside of Microstation. So if I wanted to send this terrain model, let's say for example to an architect or to a contractor or to someone other discipline, all I have to do is send them the design file that has the terrain model in it. And they actually will have tools inside of Microstation, for example the info dialog and some other basic tools that will allow them to do some basic analysis and display control on the terrain model without having any civil product even loaded. Now the next thing we've done is we've expanded the use of the element templates in Microstation to also allow the control of the display of this terrain model. So I'm going to come down to element templates in Microstation, and I'm going to come to my design file here, and I'm just going to create a new template, and let's just call this we'll just call this template Keynote. Okay. Now under element templates, and basically for those of you that are not that familiar with element templates, what they allow us to do is create named features or named styles or whatever we may want to call them, and well, element templates, and allow us to control symbology of Microstation elements. For example, you can see here I've created one called Keynote, and I have a certain level, color, line style, and weight. But you'll also notice that if I hit the Add button, I have access to all other types of different Microstation settings that I can use in this element template. And in SS3, we've enhanced that to include the ability to control the terrain model element. So for example, I may choose to do contours or flow errors, low points or high points. So let's say for example I want to set up a element template to control contours. So I'm going to turn that on. Now when I do, I'll automatically get all of these different contour settings. So let's just say for example, let's change something simple. Let's go in here and let's change the contour major to red, and let's change the contour minor to blue. Okay, and we'll leave our intervals and everything else alone. So what I've created is a new element template to control this. So the way this works is I can now come in, select this, and then from my element template drop down, I can select any element template. For example, since the Keynote was specifically designed to control the contour display, I can select that, and you can see my contours now with my red and blue contours have been displayed for me at all. Now again, I can come back here at any time to the info dialog. Again, we need to identify our DTM, come back to the dialog, and for example if I want to go back down here and turn off the contours here, I can do that as well, or select another element template. Okay. So I'm just going to turn on the boundary here. Now remember, I'm going to leave the boundary on in my 2D, but I've actually got my 3D displayed as well. Now I don't have to bring up the 3D, but if I want to, I can. So let's do a little bit of view manipulation here. I'm going to open up a second view here, and we'll just do a window tile, and we'll do a fit view here. Okay. Now notice when I open up this view, just by default it opens up in the same model, but I actually want to look at my 3D model. So I'm going to change and tell this view I don't want to look at the 2D model, I want to look at the 3D model. Okay. So when I do that, you'll notice now I'm looking at what's in my 3D model, which ends up being my triangles here. Okay. So I can change this, for example, to an isometric view. We'll just need to turn off our clipping plane here, and you can actually see now that we're looking at our 3D in an isometric view. So I can come up here, pick this view up and rotate this in 3D, and and look at that in whatever view I choose to do that. So what we're looking at now is we've got our 2D plan over here with our topo. I've got my reference DTM or reference terrain model displayed as a boundary, and then over on the right I'm actually able to see the 3D. Now, one more thing before we move on. We've introduced a new technology which is moving the terrain model into the design file. Now let's look at one more new technology that I'm going to introduce. You'll notice that when we select an element, a civil element such as a terrain model, that we get these new what we call context toolbars that pop up. Okay, and we'll be using them throughout the demonstration and talking about them a little bit more as we move along. But basically the way they work is anytime you select a civil element, for example a terrain model or an alignment or a profile or even a model, you'll get these context sensitive toolbars. So they will recognize what you've selected and give you particular options. For example, with a terrain model we could look at its properties. For example, I may want to export that terrain model out to Trimble or Leica or TopCon or maybe XML format or whatever we choose to do. But you'll also notice that my second option here gives me the ability to set this as my default terrain model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that option. Now again, if I come back and select it again, now it says clear the default terrain model. So what this context sensitive toolbar has allowed me to do is to now set this as my default terrain model. So what that does is now as I move ahead in my project and I get ready to cut a profile or I get ready to cut cross sections, it doesn't have to prompt me or ask me for what terrain model it wants to use because I've already designated this as my active or my default terrain model. So now that we've got our existing ground terrain model brought in and we've also set it as our active or our default terrain model, we're ready to move on to another aspect of our project, which is the geometry and specifically both horizontal and vertical geometry. So let's come back over to our task menus and we'll go first of all to general geometry. Now, under general geometry I've got an icon here that allows me to open a features toggle bar. So I'm going to open that up, and what this allows me to do is specify as I'm beginning to design my horizontal or my vertical geometry what style or what feature I want to be associated with that. So I'm just going to choose this from my features pull down and I'm going to select this proposed alignment. I've also got a toggle here that allows me to force that particular feature on anything that I do. So I'm going to toggle that on, which again allows me to force that feature, and then I'm just going to move that up out of the way and dock it. Now let's come back over to our horizontal geometry, and we have all of our different horizontal geometry for placing for example lines, arcs, spirals, etc. Now in the interest of time we want to do something fairly simple, so I'm just going to do a complex by PI. Now as I move out onto the design file, you'll notice that attached to my cursor are all of my prompts. Now again, if I move back over here, you'll notice there is a dialog, and you can set options in the dialog and you can use the dialog, but you'll also notice that you're not forced to use that because we'll give you the prompts directly on your cursor. You'll also notice the little beside the radius there's a left and right arrow. Those correspond to the left and right arrow keys on my keyboard, which allows me to scroll through different options. By the way, these options are customizable. For example, you can choose which options you want to be prompted for. You can hide other options. You can set default values in these, etc. So we're going to start out here, and we'll just start out with, let's say, a radius of 450. And again, I'm just going to eyeball something through here for the interest of time. So we'll just start somewhere down in here. We'll move up into this area here with a radius of 450. Let's flatten that out a little bit, say to a radius of about 830. Okay. Go a little bit flatter here to a radius of, again, about 1170. Okay. Come back even a little bit flatter radius with about 1500. Okay, up into this area. And then finally we will move back to a short radius and finish up near the end of our project right here. Now before we move on and begin to look at our vertical, let's take a look at one more thing. I'm going to come back over to my general geometry, and you'll notice one of the options I have here is to open design standards and to set design standards. So I'm going to click on the open design standards. And what this does is this gives us access to design standards that I have stored in a DGN library. So in our case, we either, let's say we began to design our road and we forgot to set a design standard, or let's say when we began to design, maybe we didn't know what our design standard might be. In any case, we didn't actually make use of the design standard tool as we began to design. So we want to rectify that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to select my design standard. So I'll just say, for example, this is a 2-lane, 6% super, 50 kilometers per hour. And then we've got a couple of toggles here. The first one allows you to force that design standard. So I'm going to toggle that on. And then what would happen now is any alignment or any geometry I put in would be checked against this specific design standard. But as I mentioned, we didn't actually do this. Let's say we forgot to do this when we put this original alignment in. So what I'm going to do is come back after the fact and actually set that design standard. So I can choose this option right here. You'll notice the cursor prompt says to select the element. I'm going to select that element and then I'm going to accept it. Now you'll notice a couple things happen. What happens is the alignment is automatically checked against your design standards. And if there's anything in that alignment that causes us any problems, it's going to automatically put these little, what I call little error glyphs. And these error glyphs, if you actually hover over them, will tell us what our problem is. In this case, it tells us we're missing a transition between our arc and our line. We also got a civil message center that will also allows us to come down in here and see any of the errors or any of the warnings that may be issued with that particular design standard. So for now, we'll just turn that off and move that back out of the way. So now that we've got our alignment in, let's go take a look at some of the functionality that we now have available to us. So I'm going to zoom in down here, first of all, on the south end of the alignment. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select my alignment, and you'll see this same new technology of these context toolbars pop up. So again, just like you saw earlier with my terrain model, when I highlight the terrain model and hover, I get a context toolbar that gives me options. It's the same thing here. It's very intuitive. It knows exactly what you're selecting, in this case an alignment, so it gives me different options. For example, here, if I wanted to come in, for example, and change the name of my alignment, I could change that to State Road 357, let's just say, for example. If I wanted to come back later, let's say, for example, I want to generate some horizontal geometry reports. Again, there's no reason to go to a dialog. I just select the alignment, select the horizontal alignment geometry report, and there's the geometry report for that particular alignment. You'll also have access to the civil browser to other types of reports. For example, maybe I want to look at a curve data report, or I want to look at a elements table so I can see all the different reporting on my control points. Or maybe I want to go ahead and actually just create a PDF formatted report to send out to somebody in that format as well. So you'll have access to all of those, again, just from hovering over an alignment. It knows it's an alignment, so it just gives you the horizontal geometry report option as it goes. Now, one of the options you'll see here is the ability to be able to open a profile view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that option, and it says select or open the view. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to open view 3, and I'm going to select that, and it's going to automatically cut a profile for me. Okay, so there's our existing profile. Now let me kind of zoom down here in this area here. I want to rotate this view here so we can kind of get a better idea of what's going on here in 3D as we move through here. So let's go back over to our profile view here. Now, this is a new type of view inside of Microstation. It's called a profile space or a profile view. For example, you'll see here under View Attributes, you've got your standard attributes, but you'll notice down here on the bottom you've got a new civil option that gives you the ability to be able to exaggerate that view. So in my case, I'm going to select, let's say for example, 5. You've also got the ability here to fit the extent of the profile, or you can actually fit according to the plan extents, which will actually fit the profile to match what you see in plan view. Now, what I want to do for now, you can also see, by the way, that as I move in this view, the element handlers, or the what I call the element decorators, for example, the elevations and the stations, those are all dynamic. So as I move around, the elevations are changing and the stations are changing as well. And you've got all of your standard view control options here as well. So I'm going to kind of zoom in down here on the south end of this profile so we can kind of take a look at what's going on. Now, one of the things we want to see is the fact that this profile is dynamically linked to this particular alignment. So for example, I'm going to come back over and I'm going to select one of my element handlers here, and I'm going to pick it up, and I'm actually going to move this profile. Now as I do, you'll notice, move the alignment. As I do, you'll notice that the profile is actually being recut or recalculated on the fly. So there's no reason anymore, for example, when you change an alignment, you don't necessarily have to go back and recut the profile. In fact, you don't have to recut the profile. If you make any change to your alignment, be it stationing, you change the radius of a curve, anything in particular, that profile will just dynamically update on the fly. Now let's look at some other options that you've got within the profile. I'm going to come in and select the profile. I'm going to select the profile here, and you'll notice as I select the profile, I also get the same context toolbar. So you're going to see a lot of consistency between all the different options, whether you're selecting a train model, whether you're selecting a horizontal alignment, whether you're selecting a profile, existing, proposed, or even the model itself. You're going to have these context toolbars. So these context toolbars know what I selected. So for example, it says, do you want to set this as your active profile? Now I'm not going to do that right now. We'll come back later and use that option. But for now, because I've got an existing profile, it's going to give me the option to create a best fit profile. So I'm going to select that option. I'm just going to select the normal mode. I'm going to put in a 200-foot minimum curve length and a 600-foot maximum curve length, and then I'm just going to hit a data point. Now a couple things happen when I do that. You'll notice that it actually creates me a best fit vertical curve through there. You'll also notice, for example, over here in the plan view, that it actually made that best fit vertical profile my active profile. So now I've got a true 3D alignment. And you can also see how these are all dynamically linked. So for example, I'm going to move back over here and move that same option there, and you'll notice as I do that, not only is the existing ground being recut, the proposed profile via the best fit is automatically being recalculated, and you can see it all moving over in the 3D view as well. So again, all of these three views are dynamically linked together. So as I make a single change to my horizontal alignment, that change is also reflected in my existing profile, my best fit profile, as well as the profile over here in my 3D view as well. Okay, so I want to do a little bit more than that. So I'm going to take a minute here. Let's just go ahead and delete this best fit profile, and I'm going to go back here and look at this and create a new vertical profile. Now if I come back over to my task menus under geometry, you can see that you've got all types of vertical geometry options here for placing your tangents and vertical curves and different types of options here. You've also got these on your view right here as well. So if I click this and drop down, you'll have these commands right here, because we know this is a profile view. We'll give you these options right here with the drop down. So I'm going to just do something fairly simple. I'm going to do a vertical complex by VPI. And again, you'll notice there's my prompts, and if we come back over here, here's my dialog, but again, I don't need my dialog. So I can scroll through my different parameters. I've got the vertical curve parameter there. I've got the length. I've got the slope. and I can lock in. I'm going to leave this at a 600-foot radius here to start with. So I'm just going to come down here and put in something fairly simple. So let's just start here. We'll come up right into this area right here, and then we'll end right down here. And so we've got here, if I select, now what I'm going to come in and do is I'm going to select this vertical profile, and you'll see that when I select it I get these same type of element handlers. So for example, if I want to come in here and let's say I want to change that from a 600 to a 1200 foot vertical curve, I can just make that change dynamically on the fly. So again, very consistent there. I can pick these up and move them. Okay, if I make a change and I don't want to do that, I can just do an undo and I can put that back. Now again, we can come in here and design multiple profiles, alternate ones, alternate two, but at some point before we begin to move ahead with our model, we want to have the ability to set an active profile. So what I'm going to do is hover over this, select this proposed profile and hover, and again when I do I get my context toolbars. Now you'll notice that I don't get a best fit option. Even though this is a profile, the context toolbar actually recognizes the difference between an existing and a proposed profile and can dynamically give you update those and give you changes on the fly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and say I want this to be my active profile. Now again, once I set an active profile, I immediately get the 3D profile or 3D alignment in my 3D view. Okay. So what I'm going to do for now is I can just now. By the way, I can, for example, I can sync that view out of the way and bring that view back up in a full screen mode. I can resize that view. I can move it to different locations. I can delete that view. I can bring it back up later. So you know, you don't have to keep all these views open. They're easily accessible. They're just standard Microstation views that can be open, closed, resized, docked, tiled, and positioned the way that you would like to use them in your design. Okay, so now we've got our vertical profile designed. We've got it set as an active profile, and you can see now we've got our 3D alignment or our backbone. So now we've got enough information that we can begin to build a corridor. So I'm going to kind of zoom in again on the south end here, and I'm just going to select my alignment. And what I do is as I hover over my alignment, I again get my context toolbar pops up. Now you'll notice something though this time that's a little bit different, is that I get some additional options. For example, I get an option to create a corridor. I get an option to create an object by a single template. These options weren't available to me when I selected my alignment earlier. Now this brings up a very important point about context toolbars. Not only are context toolbars, as their name implies, context sensitive. So for example, if I select a train model, I get options for a train model. If I select an alignment, I get options for an alignment. Select a profile, I get options for a profile. Not only is it sensitive in that way, but it's also sensitive in the fact, for example, it can tell an existing profile from a proposed profile. But even beyond that, they're dynamic in the sense that you only get certain options if you've got enough information available to make that icon viable. For example, earlier when I selected my horizontal alignment, I did not have an option to create a corridor. That was because I did not at the time have an active profile. But as soon as I select an active profile and I come back, now it says, okay, you've got enough information, I'm going to give you the ability to create a corridor. So let's go in and do that. Let's go in and say we're going to create a corridor, and it says what's your corridor name. In my case, it just picks up the default, what we renamed it to earlier was State Road 357. I'm going to select that. It wants to know where do you want to start. Notice that it locks to the beginning. I can use the Alt button to unlock it, but I'm just going to let it lock to the beginning of my alignment and let it lock to the end of my alignment. It wants me to select a template, so I'm going to use my Alt down arrow to access my template library, and in my case I'll just select a 3-lane curb and gutter urban. I'll accept that. It wants to know where do I want to start that at, so I'm going to start that at the beginning, and it wants to know where do I want to finish that template drop. Now in my case I'm just going to bring it up, let's just say somewhere in this area right in here, and we'll drop that in there. And then it wants to know the drop interval. I'm going to just leave it at 10 and say OK. Now what it's done for me automatically here is you can see that it has built my corridor for me along with all of my geometrics in my plan view, and at the same time it's built the corridor in my 3D view on the fly. So let's come in here. You can see this is all 3D, so we can kind of move this around. If I want to change it, let's say from a wireframe to a smooth view, we can do that. Notice I've already got my materials assigned, such as my grass or my concrete, so those can be pre-assigned as we do that as well. Now you'll notice again how this is all dynamic. For example, let's look at a couple options. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to select my alignment, and let's say I decide I want to move my alignment. As I do, you can notice that my the 3D view is actually updating to show my modified profile. And if I make a change, you notice my model is just going to update on the fly. Notice if you want to put that back, you just do an undo. Everything moves back. Now this same thing also goes to your, for example, to your profile. So I'm going to tell it to open my profile view that I created earlier. So let's come down here at the beginning here, and let's grab my existing profile, and let's say, for example, that I want to move it here. You'll notice as I'm moving my proposed profile, the 3D alignment is updating. I may decide I want to move it right here in this area, and you'll notice that the model updates automatically to reflect that change. If I if I want to drop down and lessen my cut, I can drop that down, and that change is reflected automatically. Now that we've got our model done, let's take a look ahead and see some of the other things that we can do with it. I'm going to do a couple things here as we begin. Let's go ahead and change this back to a wireframe mode. And let's kind of move up here into this area where we ended our original template drop. And I just want to move this so we can kind of see what's going to be happening. Let's do the same thing over in our plan view, and let's look at what we have. So here's where we stopped our original template drop about halfway up along our project. Now let's take a look at a few things here that we have available to us. You'll notice in the 2D view here that you've got this kind of gray outline. Now this actually represents our corridor for us, and of course what it does is it gives us the ability to graphically select our corridor. Now when I do that, just as we did earlier, we get our context toolbar. So you can see the consistency in the user experience or the interface. So it doesn't matter whether it's a terrain model or horizontal vertical geometry or even our corridor. When you select it, you will get the same context toolbars. Now let's go look at a few things that we can do. For example, down here under our reports, you have access to multiple types of report, and one of the options you can use is your component quantities. So here I've gotten all my component quantities for the model that I've got so far. If I wanted to, for example, check the cost of something, I can just put in a unit cost for example, my asphalt, and you can see here the total estimated cost just changes on the fly. If I want to do a report on this, I just click on the report, and you can get a component quantities report with all of your different quantities as well as the associated unit costs, both for each template drop as well as the total estimated cost for the project. If we want to come back over, for example, some other options we may have here under corridor views. You've already seen obviously the profile view, but maybe we want to look at a cross-section view. So I'm just going to click on that. We'll open a view 4, accept it, and there's the cross-section view. You've got your little navigator options, which allow you to move through your stations. You can zoom in and zoom out. You can pan around. You've also got your view properties, which will allow you to change certain things, like whether you want to center along the backbone or change your vertical exaggeration. Okay. Also, let's come back over and take a look at something that's a little bit new. It kind of uses some existing functionality, but it's called corridor settings. Now, corridor settings, let's move this just a hair so we can kind of see it a little bit better. You can kind of notice over here we're using kind of some wide template drops. And we're not, you'll notice at this point we're not taking into account anything like our cardinal points. We're not doing any chording through the curves. We've always had these options in previous versions. Now you've got this concept of a design stage. So for example, right now I'm in a preliminary. If I wanted to go to a final, then you can set up your final to have those cardinal points automatically turned on, as well as any of your chording. So I'm just going to hit an apply here, and what it'll do for me is it'll rebuild my model with all of those additional settings taken into account. And you can see here in the 3D view that you get all of those additional settings. Obviously, if I'm just designing, maybe I want to go to a conceptual or a preliminary mode, so I can just change it to a preliminary design stage, hit apply, and it'll immediately just put it back, which makes my model and my template drops a little easier to work with if I'm just in a design phase. Now let's look at some other options that we have. You'll notice over here you've got some other graphics. You can kind of see here this is the outline of your limits construction, or the limits of your template tie downs here. You've also, we mentioned earlier that we created these edge of pavements for you. Now I can actually select this and actually have the ability to move that template drop. So for example, I get these same type of graphical handlers that I have both with the horizontal and vertical geometry. So for example, if I want to pick this up, and let's say I want to move it up into this area right here, I can do that. When I do that, not only will everything be updated in the 2D view, but you'll also notice it's updated in the 3D view. Again, because we're just in Microstation, we get undo, redo. So if I want to do an undo and put that back, I can just do an undo, and you can see that all works very nicely. By the way, if you wanted to go to a particular station, you also have the in-place editing for your station there. So I could just key in a particular station and have that move to that station automatically for me. But let's take a little bit a look at a little more important functionality, and that's the ability to remember a designer's intent, or the actual engineering decisions that go into the design process. Now to do this, I'm gonna come down here and just draw. I'm gonna come in here to my drawing task, and I'm just going to select a place line. Now let's go change the color here so we can see it. Now let's say, for example, that I had made a decision that I needed to build a wall over here. So let's say for whatever reasons we've got some right-of-way restrictions. So I'm gonna come in here, and I'm just going to graphically with Microstation, I'm gonna draw a wall there. Okay, and then let's say that I want this template to actually the end of my template drops to stop at the end of this wall. Now I have a couple of ways I could do this. I could calculate the station and elevation. I'm sorry, the station at the end of this wall, and then I could just key in that station right here. But the problem with that is I'm actually limiting it to just to a station, which doesn't have a lot of intelligence. A better solution would be to pick this up, and then if I want this to stop at the end of the wall, just snap to the end of the wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let AccuSnap grab the end of that wall. I'm going to accept it, and of course you'll notice everything is moved up and both in the 2D and in my 3D model. But now here's the difference, okay? And this is very important to understand. What it just did when I did that is it basically stored a rule or a relationship kind of behind the scenes that said, oh, you want me to stop this template drop at the end of that wall. Now the difference here is, now let's say for example several weeks later I come back and I decide, you know what, we can't put that wall there. It's maybe we did some core borings, the foundation changes needed to be made, it was too expensive, maybe there's some right-of-way issues or some easement issues, and we decide, you know what, I can't put the wall there, I'm going to have to put it, let's say, right here. So when I move that wall, you'll notice that the wall moves, but also not only did my template updated both in 2D and it updated in 3D as well. So that's the power of this technology, which is really kind of under the hood or behind the scenes, is that you can actually tell us what you want us to do and we'll remember that. So if we come back 6 weeks later or 6 months later and we need to move a wall or we need to move an intersection, we can update all the elements that are associated with that wall or with that intersection, and you as a designer and engineer can have confidence that your updates have been done correctly. Now let's go look a little bit further. Now originally when we placed this our original corridor in and stopped our template drop right in here. Now let's say I want to come in and I want to do an additional template drop. So what I'm going to do again, just select my corridor. I'm going to get my context toolbar and I come down here to my corridor creation tools, and you'll notice I have several options. One is to create a template drop. I can also create a transition. I can define secondary alignments. I can define parametric constraints, end condition exceptions. So these are all the standard roadway designer tools that we're used to. So I'm just going to choose create a template drop here, and it's asking me to choose the template, so I'm going to again use my Alt down arrow to access my template library. Earlier I had put in a 3-lane curb and gutter. This time I'm going to select a 5-lane curb and gutter. So we'll select that. I'm just going to accept it. It wants to know where do I want to start, and so I'm just going to pick this area right here. It wants to know where do I want to end. I'm going to use the Alt button, which will automatically lock me to my ending station of my alignment. I'm going to accept that, and then I'm going to put a drop interval of 10. So what we'll see here, obviously in my 2D, is that I'll get my edge of pavement starting at the beginning of that new template drop. But you'll also notice over here in the 3D now that we've got this, our template drop starting. So we've just kind of got this open space right here in the middle. Now, let's go put in a transition. And this is this next part is just so great because it's going to show how our templates can actually update and reflect changes in our graphical or geometry. So to do this, the first thing I'm going to do, notice at this point I've just got a big hole here. And I could go in and do a few things, but I'm just going to show you one way to do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the hole. So to do that, I'm just going to grab this particular template drop. I could go the other way, and I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to also snap to my wall right there. So when I do that, you'll notice it moves that one up, and it catches it right here, which is exactly what we want to do. Now what I want to do is I want to put in some transitional elements. So I'm going to go back to my general geometry. I'm going to open my feature toggle bar here, feature toolbar. I'm going to go down to linear geometry. I'm going to select edge of pavement because that's the feature that I want to draw here. And I'm going to turn on that toggle to force that on anything that I'm about to do. Let's then go back over to our horizontal geometry and let's select our offset transition tool. Now the offset transition tool's actually got multiple options here. You'll notice I've got a variable offset, an offset and ratio, or a single offset, which would just be a copy parallel. But I want to do a variable offset because I want to transition from the 3-lane to the 5-lane. So I'm just going to select variable offset. Now it's prompting me to select the element that I want to calculate the offsets off of. So I'm just going to select my alignment right there. Now the first thing you'll notice that I've got my initial starting offset set at 5.4. Okay, so I want to, and the next, you'll notice if I do my right arrow, it says what do you want your distance. So I could, if I wanted a 150-foot transition or whatever, I could actually put that in. But in my case, I'm just going to eyeball it a little bit. So I'm going to say, actually in my case, I'm going to snap to that element right there and say that's where I want to start. Now it says where do you want to end, and you can see it's just holding the 9.4, and so I'm just going to say, well, I want to end it, we'll just say for right now, we could key in a distance or station, but I'm just going to eyeball it and say right there. Now it gives me another option which is very nice. It says, well, do you want to mirror that? Now if I didn't, I could just use the down arrow to change that to no, but in my case I do want to transition both sides, so I'm going to select and change the mirror to yes. Now at this point, notice we haven't seen any changes because I've got kind of 2 edge of pavements out here, and that's not really what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that original edge of pavement that was created by my template drop. I'm going to pick it up and I'm actually going to say I want you to extend that back to that location right there. Now when I do that, you'll notice both in the 2D and the 3D that it's changed and my transition is actually put in for me. So let's rotate that a little bit so we can actually see that here. So let's move that, and I get it there so we can actually kind of see that transition's been put in for us. Let's do the same thing on the other side. I'll just select that element, I'll pick it back up and let it snap to that element there. And what that does, that cleans up my edge of pavement in my 2D view, but at the same time it actually builds my transition in my 3D view as well. So that's just an excellent example of how, notice, just changing the geometry, changing the 2D elements, I'm sorry, the elements graphically in the 2D view automatically updates our elements or our model in the 3D view. Now as we finish up here, I want to show one more example to kind of show the power of this technology and the way the pieces can be put together to suit your particular workflow, or any particular workflow for that matter. Now to do this, I want to go back to kind of our original file. So if you'll remember, here we are in my 2D view. I've got my topography referenced in. I've got my 3D model over here in my 3D view, and I've got it referenced back. So this is kind of where we started earlier when we had our alignment. So I'm going to do something very similar as I did earlier, but I want to show you something. So to do that, I'm going to come over here into Project Explorer, and I'm going to open my Civil browser, and I'm going to come down into my feature management. Now again, you'll notice these are grayed out, and the reason they're grayed out is because they're all being read from a DGN library. Now earlier we looked in our styles file, and we have alignments and edge of pavements and things like that, but you'll also notice this time I've done something a little bit different. I created a category called roads, and under roads I created a 2-lane rural, a 3-lane urban, and a 5-lane urban. Now let's just pick one of these, and then let's go look at this in the info dialog and actually look at this particular feature. Now I want to point out something here. You'll notice that this particular feature called 3-lane urban, if I come in and look at it, there's a couple of settings here I want to point out. One of the options here is automatically create 3D elements, and this option is set to true. You'll also notice here under the template that I've actually picked a template and assigned it to this particular feature. Okay, so this feature is a little bit different. It's a standard feature. It could be anything, but what I've done is I've turned on a couple of things in this feature. I've told it to automatically create 3D elements, and I've told it what template I would want to assign to this. Okay, so I just wanted to review that, so let's just put that back. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to my general geometry. I'm going to open my feature toolbar again, and I'm going to go select one of those roads. So let's say, for example, that I'm doing preliminary design. Okay, so I'm not doing final design yet. I just want to do some preliminary design. I want to put in alignment. I want to get some idea of some cuts and fills, some potential profiles. So I'm going to select one of these road features here, and in our case, to be consistent, we'll just select the 3-lane urban. Okay. Now I'm going to select also the option here to toggle on. Now I'm going to bring this out, and I want to talk about a couple other things here. You'll notice, for example, we've got some different options here, and one is assign feature definition by element. Now what that allows us to do is if you've gone in and drawn something and realize, oh, it's not the correct feature, this allows us just to assign that feature after the fact. But these two here are the ones that I want to look at. Now you'll notice this toggle says create 3D automatically. So if we enable this toggle, okay, what this allows us to do is whenever I place an alignment, if I have this toggle on and the feature is set up to do it, then what it will do, it will automatically cut an existing profile for me, and it will automatically create a best fit profile for me. Okay, so that's what that toggle, if that toggle's off, it won't do it. That toggle on says, I want you to do it. This other toggle that I've got here says use the feature definition template. So what this one does, it says, okay, when I place this alignment in here, what I want you to do is go ahead and apply automatically the template that is assigned to this particular feature. So I'm gonna turn both of those on. I'm going to come over here and make sure that my terrain model is set, and of course it says clear, which means that it's already knows this is my active terrain model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in here to my horizontal geometry, and I'm going to just do something very simple. We'll just do a complex by VPI, and I'll just do like a 135-foot radius, something something very simple that we can kind of fit through here. So I'm going to do very similar to what I did earlier. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to select this alignment right here. So we'll just come through here. We'll put in there. We'll put in there. We'll place some PIs in here. We'll do this one here, and then we'll finish up there. Now I'm going to do a reset to complete that alignment. Now, a couple things happened. When I did the reset to complete the alignment, you'll notice that all the geometry was created for me on the fly. You'll also notice if I come over here, okay, and take a look at my 3D model was created for me on the fly. Okay, again, all I had to do was just place the alignment, and everything was taken care of for me on the fly. Again, if I want to look at, for example, let's go open our profile view. Okay, and you can see if I zoom in here that I've got both an existing profile and a best fit profile has been created for me automatically. Okay, and that was used as the basis of my 3D alignment, and of course the template allowed me to create my 3D profile automatically. So that concludes our presentation for today. Thank you very much for taking the time to sit in and listen. I hope you enjoyed it. More than that, I hope you're excited as I am about what we've got coming up, and so just stay tuned. And again, thanks for listening, and have a great day.